Have you ever wondered what happens when a UFC fighter taps out? Behind every seemingly simple submission lies a detailed, almost scientific process. Today, you'll see how techniques like the rear naked choke and the guillotine choke cut off blood flow, or air, and why they work so quickly. What's it like to feel the lights dim in just 7 seconds? Let's break it down. The rear naked choke stands out as the most dominant submission in MMA, earning its reputation as the king for good reason. Known in Brazil as mata-leão, or lion killer, this move is responsible for 43.8% of all UFC submission finishes, making it the clear favorite among fighters at every level. Its power comes from a combination of effectiveness, simplicity, and the ability to be applied from one of the strongest positions in grappling. The rear naked choke is considered a blood choke, which means it cuts off circulation to the brain rather than restricting airflow through the windpipe. By compressing the carotid arteries on either side of the neck, the blood supply to the brain is significantly reduced. These arteries, which supply oxygen-rich blood to the brain, are surprisingly easy to compress under the right conditions. Additionally, the jugular vein, responsible for draining blood away from the brain, can also be compressed in the process, yet intensifying the effects and speeding unconsciousness. And in about 7 seconds, the fighter caught in the choke has to decide between tapping out or losing consciousness. Unlike air chokes that often lead to panicked flailing because of difficulty breathing, a blood choke works quietly but brutally, leading to that famous moment where a fighter suddenly goes limp. It's because of the rear naked choke that fighters are constantly warned by their trainers not to give up their back. From behind, attackers can maintain a seatbelt grip, a secure hold around their opponent's upper body that prevents them from escaping. A classic example of its devastating efficiency came at UFC 229, during Khabib Nurmagomedov's win over Conor McGregor. With a perfectly executed back mount, Khabib set the choke and left McGregor no option but to tap. The position mattered just as much as the choke itself. From the back mount, the attacker has total control, limiting their opponent's movement while staying out of view. This positional dominance enhances the choke's effectiveness, as fighters caught in it are both physically restrained and strategically trapped. All they can do is try to defend their neck, a battle that's often lost in mere seconds. What makes the maneuver even more terrifying is that strength offers no real advantage against it. Larger and stronger fighters may try to power their way out of submission holds like arm or leg locks, but the rear naked choke doesn't offer the same opportunity for resistance. When a fighter wraps their arms around the neck and locks the choke in place, the defender has no natural strength advantage to rely on. The straightforward steps of this maneuver makes it accessible not just to professionals but to beginners as well. This is why it's often one of the first submissions people learn. While the rear naked choke is all about control and precision from the back, not every submission comes from such a dominant position. Sometimes a single mistake, like leaving your neck exposed during a takedown, can open the door to a completely different kind of threat. This is where another classic submission comes into play. The guillotine choke is a submission that thrives on timing and awareness, making it one of the most punishing moves for a fighter who lets their guard down during a match. This choke, known in judo as mai hadaka hime, has become a staple for its ability to capitalize on a single mistake, often when an opponent shoots for a takedown and leaves their neck exposed. In MMA, the guillotine accounts for around 20% of all choke finishes. While the rear naked choke usually requires a dominant position, the guillotine can be snatched up in the heat of a scramble, turning a defensive moment into an instant offensive threat. What makes the guillotine choke especially dangerous is its ability to function as both an air choke and a blood choke, depending on the placement of the forearm. If the windpipe is compressed, breathing becomes impossible and panic sets in fast. If the forearm presses more on the carotid arteries, it acts as a blood choke, cutting off blood flow to the brain and consciousness fades. This dual threat means the guillotine can end a fight quickly, regardless of whether the opponent panics from lack of air or fades out from lack of blood flow. The mechanics behind it are straightforward but effective. When an opponent lowers their head to drive through a takedown, failing to keep proper head position, the defender can quickly slip an arm under the chin and wrap it around the neck. By anchoring their grip, usually grabbing their own hand or wrist, they create a tight seal that forms a vice-like pressure around the neck. The choke can be applied standing, from the guard, or even from a sprawl, which adds to its versatility. There's no shortage of effective use of this submission in the UFC. One of the most memorable instances came during UFC 140 when Chan Sung-jung, also known as the Korean Zombie, submitted Dustin Poirier in the 4th round with a lightning-fast guillotine. After defending a takedown attempt, Jung transitioned seamlessly into the choke, snatching Poirier's neck and applying the submission from a standing position before transitioning to the ground to seal the win. This fight showcased the guillotine's ability to both punish poor takedown defense and end fights quickly, even in the later rounds when fighters are physically drained. The high success rate of this maneuver comes from the fact that even experienced fighters can get caught if they make a small mistake. Wrestlers, for example, are especially vulnerable because takedown techniques in wrestling don't require defending against submissions like the guillotine. The guillotine punishes this oversight by turning a strong offensive move into a potential fight-ending trap. Because of its straightforward mechanics and high percentage of finishes, the guillotine is often one of the first submissions taught in Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu and MMA gyms. Beginners can pick up the basics quickly while advanced fighters develop their own setups and counters. Choke submissions aside, other maneuvers in MMA focus to a different kind of vulnerability, using leverage and technique to attack a joint rather than the airway or arteries. A fan favorite and clear example of technical skill is the armbar, a submission that turns an opponent's own arm into a liability. The armbar is one of the most frequently seen submissions in both Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu and mixed martial arts. Its reputation comes from its reliability across all levels of competition, and its ability to neutralize strength with leverage and precise control. The goal of the armbar is straightforward. Take control of the opponent's arm and apply enough pressure to hyperextend the elbow joint. This move takes advantage of the fact that while the elbow is strong in flexion and extension, it cannot bend backward. By trapping the wrist and locking the arm in place, the attacker forces a simple choice: tap out or risk serious injury. The process starts with isolating the opponent's arm. From there, gaining control of the wrist and using their body to create a lever against the elbow. The finish comes from bridging the hips upward while pulling down on the opponent's wrist, creating intense pressure at the elbow. The armbar has been the deciding factor in countless UFC fights, leaving an impression on fans and fighters alike. Ronda Rousey, one of the most dominant figures in women's MMA, built her early career largely around this submission. A standout moment came during her bout against Miesha Tate at Strikeforce in 2012. Rousey gained control of Tate's arm and ended her night. Fighters like Demetrius Johnson have also demonstrated the armbar's effectiveness in high-pressure moments, such as his flying armbar finish that showcase both speed and technical precision. These moments highlight how the armbar can end a fight instantly, regardless of the size or strength of the opponent. To make matters more efficient and dangerous, the armbar can be effectively executed from various positions. Technically, the armbar is all about angles and timing. The attacker must align their hips perfectly under the opponent's elbow and keep the arm completely straight. Any bend in the arm or gap between the hips and the joint can give the defender a chance to escape. This attention to detail is why the armbar, while simple in concept, takes years to master. Fighters drill the mechanics repeatedly, learning to recognize openings and control the opponent's movements throughout the setup and finish. The armbar's staying power in MMA comes from its blend of simplicity and depth. It doesn't require extraordinary athleticism or complicated setups, but it rewards those who focus on control and precision. That's why it remains a go-to submission in both sport and self-defense settings. While the armbar relies on isolating a single joint, some submissions use the opponent's own body to create a different kind of pressure. These techniques show how control and positioning can turn even a defender's own arm into the key to their defeat. In mixed martial arts, some submissions force the defender to work against themselves in ways that seem almost counterintuitive. The arm triangle choke, sometimes called the side choke, stands out for exactly this reason. It's a blood choke that uses the defender's own arm and shoulder along with the attacker's pressure to block the flow of blood to the brain. This technique is both efficient and versatile, making it a staple for fighters who want a reliable way to finish a match from a variety of positions. The arm triangle is designed to compress the carotid arteries, the main blood vessels running along each side of the neck. When these arteries are squeezed, blood flow to the brain drops off rapidly, and unconsciousness can follow in seconds if the choke is held. The move doesn't cut off air. Fighters can still breathe, but the brain can't function without oxygen-rich blood, so the body quickly shuts down. This is what separates a blood choke like the arm triangle from air chokes or joint locks. The effect is both fast and decisive. To set up the arm triangle, the attacker typically starts from a dominant top position, such as side control or mount. The opportunity often comes when the defender tries to frame or push away with their arms, creating a gap. The attacker threads one arm under the defender's neck and wraps it around the back of the head, trapping the defender's own arm against the side of their neck. The next step is to use body weight and positioning to press the defender's shoulder into one side of their neck, while the attacker's arm presses on the other. By locking the hands behind the defender's head or on the attacker's own bicep, the hold becomes secure. Once the position is tight, the attacker gradually increases the pressure, causing the blood flow to the brain to slow or stop. The defender has only a short window to tap before losing consciousness, and this submission has been seen in countless UFC fights, often ending bouts with a devastating inevitability. At UFC 160, Cain Velasquez showed the effectiveness of the arm triangle against Antonio Bigfoot Silva. From the mount position, Velasquez isolated Silva's arm and locked in the choke with a textbook application. Silva had no answer, and the fight was stopped. Another unforgettable example came at UFC 220, where Daniel Cormier used this very move to defeat Volkan Oezdemir. The arm triangle was applied from side control, showing how even subtle positional adjustments can make this choke a fight-ending tool. The submission doesn't require explosive speed or extreme flexibility. It rewards patience and control. The attacker can take their time adjusting the position, making small corrections until the choke is inescapable. Once the choke is locked in, escaping is nearly impossible, without a significant mistake from the attacker. Training the arm triangle is a fundamental part of grappling for MMA. Fighters drill the sequence repeatedly, learning to recognize the right moment to transition into the choke and how to use their weight to maximize pressure. The move is taught early in Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu and remains a favorite at advanced levels because of its straightforward setup and high success rate. While the arm triangle choke is all about using position, leverage, and timing. Let's take a look at another technique that targets the joints using a different kind of control to force the tap. The kamura lock, sometimes called the double wrist lock or chicken wing, stands out as one of the most adaptable submissions in mixed martial arts. Developed in judo and popularized by Masahiko Kimura's match against Helio Gracie in 1951, this technique has deep roots in grappling history. Its reputation comes from how it isolates both the shoulder and elbow joints using a figure 4 grip, giving fighters the power to control and finish an opponent from a wide range of positions. At its core, the kimura targets the shoulder joint by forcing it to rotate in a direction it's not built to handle. The shoulder is a ball and socket joint designed for movement in many directions, but it has strict limits on how far it can turn. The kimura takes advantage of this by locking the defender's arm behind their back and using the attacker's grip to apply rotational pressure. As the hold tightens, stress builds first in the shoulder, then in the elbow. If the defender refuses to tap, the result can be a sprain, dislocation, or even a fracture, making this submission highly effective at forcing a quick tap. The kimura can be applied from both offensive and defensive positions, making it a threat wherever the fight goes. It can be applied from the dominant mount position, giving the fighter on top a strong finishing option. Contrarily, a fighter on their back will try to get their opponent off balance. When they reach down to touch the mat, gaining control of the opponent's wrist and arm is a fast track to turning the tide and applying the submission. This guard variation shows how the kimura can transform a defensive position into an offensive one in seconds. One famous and brutal example occurred in UFC 140, when Frank Mir submitted the legendary Antonio Rodrigo Nogueira. During a scramble on the ground, Mir grabbed hold of Nogueira's arm and quickly transitioned into a kimura from side control. Nogueira, a highly skilled grappler himself, initially resisted but was unable to prevent Mir from securing the hold fully. As Mir applied pressure, he snapped Nogueira's arm, forcing an immediate stoppage. This fight highlighted the devastating consequences of attempting to resist once it's locked in. What makes the kimura especially effective is the security of the figure 4 grip. By holding the opponent's wrist with one hand and locking their own wrist with the other, the attacker forms a chain that is difficult to break. This grip not only prevents the defender from pulling their arm free, but also multiplies the force applied to the shoulder and elbow. Training the kimura is a priority in many gyms because it teaches fighters about control, timing, and the importance of grip strength. Drilling the setup and finish from both guard and mount helps fighters develop a sense for identifying opportunities and securing the submission before an opponent can react. The kimura is yet another example of applying technique and leverage rather than strength. Submissions in the UFC are more than just moments of physical dominance. They're the perfect blend of strategy, precision, and an understanding of human anatomy. When you look at the wider view of submissions in the UFC, the central theme is that strategy, timing, and precision triumph over strength. Also, these techniques remind us just how fragile the human body truly is. So which submission hold is your favorite? Now that you know the science behind these maneuvers, watch the next fight with a new perspective. Which of these submissions will steal the spotlight in the octagon next? Only time and skill will tell. If you like what you saw, hit us with a like and subscribe and join us as we unpack more across the world of the UFC.